You think you are a good judge of character. You have been wrong about people your whole life, and you still believe this about yourself. Every person who ever deceived you, used you, or walked out of your life smiling, they did not hide. You were simply never taught to see. You were taught to listen, to trust words, to give the benefit of the doubt, to assume good faith until proven otherwise. That is the lie they fed you. It is dressed up as empathy. They called it emotional intelligence. They put it in corporate training courses and self-help books and told you it would make you better at relationships, better at leadership, better at life. What they never told you is this: words are the least reliable signal a human being produces. A trained liar can control their words effortlessly, but the body, the microexpressions, the baseline shifts, the involuntary leaks, the body confesses every time.
Machiavelli understood this. The FBI understands this. And in the next 12 minutes, you will understand it too. There are 5 specific behavioral signals that intelligence analysts use to read intent within seconds of meeting someone. The 5th one will explain every person who ever blindsided you. If you are not ready for this, close the video. Go back to the crowd. But if you want to know the truth, stay and do not move. The first revelation: establish the baseline, or you are already blind. Before you can detect deception, you must first know what normal looks like for this specific person. The average man walks into a conversation looking for red flags. He is scanning for the lie before he has ever mapped the truth. This is why he misses everything. He is calibrating to a fiction, a universal standard of suspicious behavior that does not exist, because human beings are not universal. This is the foundational principle of FBI behavioral analysis. Joe Navarro, former FBI special agent and author of What Everybody is Saying, calls this establishing a behavioral baseline. Before any deviation matters, you must know what this individual's neutral state looks like. How fast do they speak normally? Do they use hand gestures when comfortable? Do they hold eye contact? Or do they naturally look away when thinking? Julius Caesar was a master of this principle long before it had a name. Before every Senate meeting, before every negotiation, Caesar studied the men around him, their habits, their tics, their patterns at rest. He did not react to individual signals. He tracked divergence from pattern. That is how he knew, weeks before the Ides of March, that something was wrong. He chose to dismiss it, but he saw it.
Your instruction. The next time you enter a conversation with someone who matters, a partner, a rival, a business contact, spend the first 90 seconds only observing. Ask low-stakes questions. Watch how they hold their body when there is no pressure. Catalog the baseline. You will have nothing to measure against until you do this. The second revelation makes this baseline dangerous in ways you have not considered. The second revelation: the face speaks before the brain decides. Microexpressions are involuntary. That is not a metaphor. That is neurological fact. 99% of people spend their entire lives watching the performance, the deliberate face someone constructs for public consumption, the smile chosen, the concern manufactured, the anger strategically deployed. And they call this reading people.
Dr. Paul Ekman, the psychologist whose research formed the basis of the facial action coding system, and later inspired an entire FBI training protocol, discovered that genuine emotional responses flash across the human face in as little as 1/25th of a second before conscious suppression kicks in. These are microexpressions. They cannot be faked. They cannot be reliably suppressed by anyone who has not undergone extreme training. And even then, traces remain. Contempt, not anger, not discomfort, but contempt, is the single most dangerous expression a human being can display toward you. It is asymmetrical. It appears on one side of the face, a slight pull at the corner of the lip, a fractional elevation of one cheek. It lasts less than a quarter second.
When Napoleon was surrounded by his marshals, men who had sworn loyalty, men who had bled beside him, he saw contempt on their faces long before the betrayals at Fontainebleau. He documented it in his correspondence from Elba. He recognized it too late because he confused it with exhaustion. Your instruction: do not watch people's eyes first. Watch the lower half of the face, the area around the mouth and jaw. Contempt, disgust, and suppressed anger all register there before anywhere else. Give particular attention to asymmetry. Symmetry is control. Asymmetry is truth leaking out. But the face is only one layer. The third revelation operates below the neck, and most people never look there at all. The third revelation: the body does not know how to lie. When the mind constructs a false narrative, it consumes cognitive resources. The higher the stakes, the more cognitive load the deception requires. And as cognitive load increases, the body is left on autopilot, reverting to limbic-driven behavior it cannot police. The limbic system, the oldest part of the brain, has three responses to threat: freeze, flight, or fight. Every behavioral tell you will ever observe in a deceptive or anxious person maps to one of these three. Freeze. They go unnaturally still. The animated person who normally gestures suddenly becomes a statue when the conversation touches something they are managing. Flight. They orient their feet, their torso, or their gaze toward the nearest exit. Note, not their face. People consciously control their face. They almost never think to control where their feet are pointing. Joe Navarro calls this the most honest part of the human body. Fight. Concealed aggression that surfaces as microbursts, a flash of jaw tension, a sudden stillness in the hands, a controlled, too careful voice. Robert Greene writes in the 33 Strategies of War that the great strategist does not react to what the enemy says, he reacts to what the enemy does with his body in the moment before he speaks. This was not metaphor. This was tactical doctrine. Frederick the Great of Prussia drilled his officers in the observation of enemy formations before the first shot was ever fired. He understood that armies telegraph their movements before they commit to them. Human beings are no different. Your instruction: in any conversation of consequence, look below the chin. Watch where the feet are pointing. Watch for sudden stillness in a previously animated body. Watch for the hands moving to self-soothe, touching the neck, the face, the wrists. These are not random nervous habits. They are the body attempting to regulate a threat response the conscious mind is trying to conceal. Comment below: I watch the body, not the words. You are still here. Good. The fragile ones already left. What follows is what they could not handle. The fourth revelation: clusters, not singles. The amateur's fatal mistake. One signal means nothing. A cluster of 3 or more simultaneous signals means everything. This is where amateurs destroy relationships, careers, and reputations. They observe a single deviation from baseline, a flash of discomfort, an averted gaze, a crossed arm, and they render a verdict. They call it intuition. It is not. intuition. It is confirmation bias with a behavioral costume. The FBI's behavioral analysis protocol is explicit. No single signal is diagnostic. You are not looking for one tell. You are looking for clusters. Multiple simultaneous nonverbal signals across different channels converging on the same emotional state.
This concept maps precisely to what Dr. Albert Mehrabian identified in his communication research. The content of speech, the tone of voice, and body language are three separate channels that the subconscious brain integrates simultaneously. When those channels are aligned, you have congruence. When they diverge, when the words say one thing, the voice says another, and the body says a third, you have what intelligence analysts call leakage. Cosimo de' Medici, founder of the Medici banking dynasty and arguably the most powerful man in 15th century Europe, was known for sitting in silence during negotiations until he had observed at least 3 independent signals before committing to any position. His contemporaries thought him slow. He was reading clusters. He built an empire while they talked. Your instruction: create a mental checklist of 3 channels: face, body, voice. Before you draw any conclusion about what someone is communicating to you beneath their words, you must have signals from at least 2 of those 3 channels pointing in the same direction. 1 signal is noise, 2 signals is a pattern, 3 signals is intelligence. The 5th revelation is the one that will explain every person who has ever betrayed you. The 5th revelation: the hotspot is not the lie. It is the fear behind the lie. You have been taught to detect lying. This is the wrong objective. Lying is a behavior. Behaviors are symptoms. What you are actually looking for is the emotional state that produced the behavior. And that emotional state almost always precedes the lie by several seconds. It surfaces as a hotspot, a moment of disproportionate behavioral reaction to a stimulus that should not have produced it. This is the principle that FBI behavioral analysts and polygraph examiners use before they ever ask a potentially incriminating question. They watch how the subject responds to neutral topics. Calibrate baseline. Then they introduce the relevant topic, not with a direct accusation, but with a peripheral question that brushes close to the sensitive material. If the subject's behavioral system spikes, a change in respiratory rate, a sudden shift in vocal tone, an instinctive self-protective gesture, before any accusation has been made, that is a hotspot. Machiavelli wrote in The Prince, "Men are so simple and so subject to present necessities that he who seeks to deceive will always find someone who will allow himself to be deceived." But Machiavelli also understood the inverse. The man who cannot be deceived is not more intelligent, he is more attentive. He watches the moment before the deception is deployed, not the moment it arrives. King Philip IV of France used a version of this technique to dismantle the Knights Templar in 1307. Before presenting any formal accusation, his agents spent months watching the Templar leadership for behavioral responses to indirect questions about their order's finances and rituals. The hotspots told him everything he needed before he moved. When he finally acted, the arrests were total, and the Templars had no time to respond. Your instruction: in your next high-stakes conversation, introduce a subject adjacent to what you actually want to know. Do not ask directly. Ask obliquely. Then watch, not for the answer, but for what happens in the body in the 2 seconds before the answer comes. The throat clearing, the sudden formality, the hands that were still and are now moving.
That 2-second window is where the truth lives. Now, a moment of honesty. This path is cold. The man who learns to see through people does not become warm and connected. He becomes precise. He becomes accurate. And he becomes, to most people, unsettling, because he no longer accepts the performance at face value, and people can feel that. You will sit across from people who are performing for you, and you will see the performance for what it is, and you will smile, and they will wonder why your smile never quite reaches the eyes. And they will be right. This is the wolf's tax. The wolf does not run with the herd. The wolf watches the herd from the tree line, cold and patient and absolutely alone. And the sheep do not trust what they cannot classify. You will become unclassifiable. That comes with a price.
Machiavelli wrote The Prince while stripped of his position, imprisoned, tortured on the Strappado, exiled to a small farm outside Florence. A man who had served the Florentine Republic faithfully and been destroyed by it anyway. He had no power left, no title, no army, nothing but his understanding of how power actually functions. And from that exile, from that cold and brutal clarity, he wrote the document that shaped political strategy for 5 centuries. He did not write it to be loved. He wrote it to be understood. This freedom is cold, but it is the only freedom that is truly yours. You made it to the end. That alone puts you outside the majority. Most viewers click away before the 3rd minute. You stayed through the silence, through the discomfort, through the parts that required you to sit with what you actually are. That is not nothing.
There is a library of content on this channel that never made it to the algorithm. Material on covert power structures, psychological manipulation frameworks used by intelligence agencies, and the behavioral science that governments prefer you do not examine too carefully. That content lives in the membership. What I cannot say publicly is waiting there. Subscribe. Not because I asked you to. Subscribe because you are done being prey. Because you are done walking into rooms and trusting performances. Because you have decided, somewhere in the last 12 minutes, that the comfortable lie is no longer worth the cost. The channel will be here when you are ready. The question is whether you are ready now, or whether you need one more betrayal to make you certain.